Hey, startup founders, if you want to raise funds for your startup, or if you're frustrated after doing dozens of investor pitches with little to show for it, then you'll want to pay close attention. I'm Sam Wong, and I've been a VP, CTO, or CEO for 5 startups with 3 different exits. This video is a replay of a webinar that walks through the latest version of our 21-point pitch deck scorecard. Most pitch deck feedback is limited to a minute or 2 of verbal comments. In the rare case that founders get any written feedback, it usually just covers 4 to 6 topics. We know, we've seen hundreds of pitches across dozens of pitch events. And as an investor with Band of Angels, I designed and built the scorecard to cover 21 different factors to help founders captivate, validate, and motivate investors. We regularly use this exact scorecard to diagnose specific issues with fundraising pitches and can give founders detailed and specific actions on how to fix the problems. Startup fundraising is hard. Over 99% of pitches will fail. Quick soundbite feedback isn't that helpful. We often provide 1,000 to 2,000 words of written feedback because that's what's needed to identify and fix the many problems that typically plague most startup pitches. We know this works because here in mid-2025, in a tough fundraising environment, 100% of our active startup clients each raised several $1,000,000 in a preferred stock fundraise. If you stay to the end of this webinar, we'll show you how you can take advantage of the scorecard and our pitch deck expertise to help you build a fundable startup and raise investor funds. Let's go. Okay, everybody, thank you again for waiting. This is another session of our topic from rejected to funded startup pitch deck secrets. This session will cover a slightly different aspect than other topics that we covered before in the past. This one specifically talking about our pitch deck scorecard, which is a tool that we've spent a long time creating to really help startup founders refine their pitch in a meaningful way. So to be able to provide a little bit of background, my name is Sam Wong, and why am I doing this session? Well, I've done a lot of work in real-world startup fundraising. First off, as an investor, I'm a member of Band of Angels, which is the oldest tech angel group in the United States. We fund about 2 startups every single month. There are a total of about 400 startups that have been funded since the Band Angel Group's inception, resulting in 97 acquisitions and 17 IPOs. From the founder side, I've also spent a lot of time helping founders fundraise. Lately, I've been spending a lot of hands-on deep dive with a number of active clients. 3 out of 3 all raised in the past 12 months. I know that's not a super high volume, but given the fact that the current funding environment's been kind of tough, and the fact that reality this is really deep dive work. I am not a fundraising matchmaker. That's not all I do. I focus heavily on helping companies become fundable before the fundraise. Of those 3 clients, one of them I spent I think about 18 months with before they raised. Another one we spent 7 months. Another one we spent about 5 months. Okay, so it's not a short engagement to be able to really get a company to where it needs to be. I do a lot of hands-on work and produce deliverables. This is not point the way and hope that you get there sometime in the future. Okay, this is being a Sherpa leading the way with you. Okay, in terms of pitch experience, I am part of a number of startup accelerators. I co-wrote the class on how to build a startup pitch deck for Berkeley Skydeck. I have been a pitch judge primarily for Pitchforce, but I've also been a pitch judge for a number of other angel groups and angel sessions. And one of the most important things to remember is that when you're doing a pitch, you are communicating and hopefully you are telling a story. So I wrote a book on startup execution, as well as have a library of startup training classes. I also have a done for you, done with you pitch deck and fundraising service where we do full service pitch deck development. I also have a investor network where sometimes we invite some investors into a fireside chat and we record it and post it up on YouTube. We also have some past pitch feedback sessions where I've been a pitch judge. That's available and it's recorded. Let me put this into the chat window. So if you are interested, you can go to our YouTube channel and find some of our content and videos for you to be able to hopefully enlighten yourself. Okay. When we get into startup pitches, there are five things that we emphasize. Okay. Number one is your pitch needs to be clear, needs to be concise. It should be comprehensive to tell your complete story. It should be catchy and it should be compelling. Of these five, clarity is the most neglected. Okay. Conciseness is the most difficult. Comprehensiveness tends to be the most abused. People put way too much content in their typical pitch deck. Catchy is most ignored because people don't think about how to be able to tell a catchy story, and being compelling is the most needed. Okay. The first three focus on what you say. The fourth one, being catchy, is how you say it. And then the last one is the impact of what you say. The first four of these C's, clarity, being clear, concise, comprehensive, and catchy, that's about how you tell your story. The last one, being compelling, is about de-risking. Okay. And sadly, having been an investor for several years now, and most investors get very confusing or uninspired pitches. And this is a very, very preventable problem. Okay. So it is important that in your story, in your pitch, you tell a story about a de-risked startup. Startups for investors are very, very high risk endeavors. So, given that fact that they are such high risk, you need to be able to communicate to the investor clearly how you've mitigated those risks. In this case, if you're doing some high wire routines, that you've got a harness, a helmet, and all those things. You want to be able to tell a story that results in three things. You want to captivate your audience, validate the risk mitigation in your startup, and then motivate the investor to take action. So what I've tried to do is these are nice goals and maybe things to shoot for, but how do you specifically get better with your startup pitch? All right. So I've developed a pitch rating scale from 1 to 5. So at the bottom, needs work. That means if you get a 1, that it means you probably have multiple showstoppers that will require a lot of work, rethinking or pivot or changes of some sort. Uh, uh, a score of 2 means you're not quite there. You have some potential, but it needs a decent amount of work to address some still remaining concerning issues. Not bad. Number 3 is maybe 2 to 3 medium issues and several minor issues not addressed. Good is several minor issues not addressed. And then very good is very compelling with very few minor issues. If I looked at the overall distribution of pitches that I hear from startups, the numbers on the left is my perspective. Very, very few startups get into the upper echelons of good and very good pitches. Okay. So probably two-thirds or more of the pitches really aren't quite up to snuff. All right. But in order to raise funds and get an investor's attention, you need to be very, very good at what you're doing and what you're delivering in terms of your pitch. So how do you get better? How do you actually get feedback from your pitch delivery and your pitch itself? Well, we like to use a scorecard. And sadly, it's surprisingly rare that people get a written report. Okay. Imagine if you had your regular medical checkup and you got your blood work and they said, you're doing okay. Or you could be a little bit better. But it didn't tell you all of the details about your LDL, HDL, your, triglyceride levels, all that stuff. If you didn't get that level of granularity in your feedback, you don't know exactly what you need to do. Okay. So pitch scorecards are unfortunately very, very rare. Or when you do get some type of written feedback, they tend to be pretty sparse. Okay. There's usually insufficient actionable detail. So if you went up on Google, did a Google search on pitch scorecards, you might find some of the scorecards that I've got screenshots of here. Most of those scorecards consist of 3 or 4, maybe 5 categories, and you get a 1 to 5 point rating scale and a small space for people to maybe quickly provide some feedback. Okay. But when you look at how that affects your pitch, it's actually pretty difficult. To use an analogy, if you're thirsty and you look at a pitch scorecard, getting a sparse pitch scorecard is like getting a small cup of water. You talk to an investor, you deliver your pitch, and they give you some quick feedback, and you do it again to a different investor, maybe, and they give you more feedback, and then you continue to find people to give you feedback, and eventually you get here in this illustration 16 different uh, iterations. So, but what we've done when we created our pitch deck scorecard, which you see a screenshot here, it's a lot more detailed, which means you get a lot more content. So comparatively speaking, you can either get 16 little 4-ounce cups, or you can get two 32-ounce bottles. They, give you the same amount of water. But the reality is because typically you get the feedback iteratively, one at a time, doing 16 little cups of water just drags out the process and slows everything down. Okay. Let's break down what exactly is in the design of our pitch scorecard. So the first three are focused on that captivate. Remember, we talked about your pitch deck: captivate, validate, and motivate. So the captivate scores are broken down into three things. One is the quality of your writing. Two is the quality of the visuals in your pitch deck. And three, the quality of your delivery. Okay. These are key elements for how you actually engage and capture the investor's attention, because investors get so many pitches, you have to find a way to stand out and be memorable. Okay. The next section focuses on the validate. And if you think about the purpose of the pitch, there are 12, 14, 15 slides that you might deliver in your pitch. Each one of them has a specific purpose. Okay. I have here a slide that shows 20 common slides from an investor pitch. All right. And I'm not going to get into the detail about what these 20 slides are. I've got other training content that goes into that. But this is our version of an investor pitch deck template. Okay. And basically, with these 20 different slides, types of slides, you may not use all of them. In fact, I would recommend that you don't use all of them, because you have to customize these slides to fit the story that you need to tell. We have 15 different scores for the most common slides that typically show up in a pitch deck. Okay. So score number 2 and score number 14 span multiple slides, because the set of number 2 right there, you usually don't do all four of those slides. It's a situation slide where you're trying to communicate the context to the investor, and you will usually either tell them the context of what your business is, or you'll tell a story, and by story we means, hey, meet Joe. He's a dentist who does X, Y, and Z. But in doing his dental work, he has this problem, and blah 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 blah. And this problem causes him lots of loss of money, loss of clients, loss of time, whatever. So that's integrating the story. The elevator pitch is just a short summary of the overall what you're doing. The mission might be, oh, I grew up when my child has this medical condition. I wanted to, when we tried to address this medical condition, we had all sorts of insurance problems. My mission with this startup is to solve that so no other parent has to go through that, what I went through. So usually you'll do one of those four, which is why score number 2 here on the validate scores is 1 for those 4 slides. And similarly with number 14, usually you do 1. Sometimes you could do more than 1, but it tends to be more rare. The numbers 3 through 15, except for 14, tend to be more common. Most pitch decks have some rendition of slides 3 through 13 plus 15. Okay, so every single slide in our pitch deck scorecard gets its own grade, gets its own 5-point score, and gets its own area of motivate in our scorecard. One is the quality of your storytelling. Remember, we talked about how your pitch deck should focus on telling a story, an engaging story about a de-risked startup. into this overall de-risking store, and then all of the 20 plus criteria that we've highlighted so far get summarized again into an overall rating. All right. So we are going to have some extra time here at the end. This is not a super long session today. So if you want to be able to have some specific questions about your situation, get ready to be able to ask them. Start putting them into the chat window. All right. So talk about how this actually works in some of the times we've used our pitch deck scorecard to help founders with their pitches. We provide typically 10 times more detail. So the first section is the verbal diagnostic comments. And in this pitch scorecard, which I blurred out some of the comments, this is the actual deliverable that we produced for a client that came to us for some help with refining the pitch. We did some diagnostic commentary. We analyzed the pitch deck, how they delivered all 21 of those criteria, and provided a bunch of written feedback. In this particular example, it's a little over 1,000 words. And then we also provided corrective feedback. So the diagnosis is these are the challenges. The feedback in this case was about 1,200 words. Combined, this was over 2,300 words of feedback. The diagnostic feedback we cover and include in our express pitch package, and the corrective feedback plus the diagnostic is included in our plus or elite pitch package. Okay. In total, this is where the 21 different criteria comes together. All right. Our goal here is to help founders deliver better pitches. So, compared to where most founders get help, other advisors or maybe a deck expert, most of what we focus on is helping companies to become fundable. It's not about beautifying a pitch. It's really about helping a company become fundable. Advisors have a general focus, and deck experts tend to have very strong focus on having beautiful slides. We have hands-on startup experience, been a VP or a C-level person for 5 different startups. Maybe some of the other advisors have some startup experience, and most deck experts have never worked in their own startup, a venture scale startup. Okay, we've had the good fortune of having 6 startup exits, on the sell side and 1 on the buy side. Don't know how that works out with other advisors, and most of the time, a deck expert has not had an exit. As writing and communication is absolutely critical for putting together the pitch deck. We are a published author as well as constantly putting together a lot of the webinars that you see here and a lot of written content. Not sure about how this works with other advisors. I will say most deck experts, they produce very, very pretty slides. Okay. We have both a technical and a business background. Not sure how that works out with some of the others. We are regular pitch judges, and our customers who work with us, we give them 45 hours of our pre-recorded fundability training so they can learn the best practices. And then in some of our work together live, we can help them apply the best practices. Our focus is a proactive guided journey. Hopefully that produces more predictable, repeatable results, whereas reactive coaching, random results, and deck experts really about graphic design. It may be beautiful, but not sure if the company is truly fundable. This will be the last slide here, and then we'll get into a bunch of questions. If anybody has any, happy to help out with some of your pitch content. So I mentioned earlier the Express Pitch package. It's quick tactical diagnostics that covers about 12 slides. It includes the 21-point pitch scorecard from the diagnosis column. Okay, we do help with sometimes some rewriting of the messaging, and this is actually very, very important. Probably 60% of our work in helping companies with their pitch is about writing. That's an unfortunate truth, but most of the time we've found that creating high density, very meaningful, direct content is very, very hard. Okay. We do spend some time helping with storytelling and flow. There are other aspects like including the training, fundability diagnostics, investor referrals, That's not included with the express pitch package, but we do have a coaching session included with that pitch package. The plus has all that plus more of what I just mentioned, the training, helping you with your fundability, doing more revisions as you deliver and practice the revised pitch. Typically more appropriate for pre-seed and seed, and then elite tends to be a larger number of slides with more practice and revisions. And and I neglected to include, actually, I put it here. Let me grab this here. If you're interested in the that Express Pitch Package, which is a new introduction here, I'll go ahead and put this in the chat window. Okay. So that's it. It's short and sweet. Okay. So let me go through here and see if we can catch up on any questions that people might have. Okay. Do, 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 do. Okay, people are asking about the 21 point checklist as a download. It is actually in our it's on our website as a blog. So here, this is our pitch scorecard blog. Okay. Um, and other details about our scorecard. The rating and the weighting is different, meaning the earlier that you are in your startup journey, the less mature you are, the criteria for assessing your startup should be different. Okay. So if you're a Series seed or pre-seed company, a true investor focusing on pre-seed uh, stage companies will not expect you to have as much customer revenue. In fact, many of them will be open to funding you even if you don't yet have revenue, if all the other aspects of your company are going well. But if you're a Series A funding, then they probably do expect you to have revenue, and the weighting changes. So our scorecard has a little flip the switch depending on whether you're doing later stage funding or earlier stage, and that changes the weighting of the 21 criteria. Okay. And the score is there. There's also a recommended time budget per topic. Okay. So if you have 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 20 minutes to present, I have recommended amount of time to spend on each one of those topics. If you're interested, this is where you can get the details of the pitch scorecard. So rather than just giving you a checklist of 21 items, just go here and reference the scorecard. I will put it into the chat window so you can refer to the blog there. When you get to the blog, it summarizes the scorecard, and there's a link to sign up for our free basic training tier, and that's where it'll give you the link where you can access the scorecard itself. Feel free to, it's an Excel spreadsheet which is up in Google Drive. So you just open up that Google Sheet and do a save as. Okay, don't request permissions to edit this. I'm not going to give it to you. You just do a save as, and you'll hit your own copy. All right. So go back to the question. Sorry for the long-winded answer. You can get the scorecard here at this blog location. All right. Other questions? I don't see a ton of. Oh, who would you start presenting the pitch deck to get these scores? Okay. So I'm not sure I understand the question. Who would you start presenting the pitch deck to get these scores? Um, if you mean who at the startup presents, it's pretty much always the CEO. If it's not the CEO, that raises some questions. But I'm guessing that's not what your question is. I'm guessing you're asking who do you present to be able to get help to get the pitch deck scorecard filled out? I think that's what the question is. Well, the answer to that is back here with our pitch deck offers. And go ahead and um, If you're interested, we have the link that I put in the chat window earlier about where you can purchase that pitch deck package. We spend a decent amount of time in putting into the pitch deck package. We'd love to be able to just volunteer it, but unfortunately, we don't have the time and bandwidth to be able to do that. We've worked very, very hard to get that price down. So those of you who've been part of other webinars have seen other versions of our offers, and we've worked really, really hard to make that express package as affordable as possible. Okay. There's a question from June. I don't understand the question. What are cohorts looking for? I'm not sure what uh, cohort you're referring to, unless it's maybe an accelerated cohort. June, I think you should be able to unmute yourself if you're still here. If you want to clarify your question, feel free to unmute yourself. Okay.
Apt to speak. Okay, so I'm applying for the WTIA cohort, and I'm wondering what kind, and they are asking for a pitch deck. And so I made a pitch deck with about 9 slides, but I'm wondering what that type of cohort is looking for. And I'm going to apply to other cohorts
Okay.
until I get in one. Thank you.
I don't know the specific program that you're applying to, so I can't speak to exactly what they're asking for. But most accelerator type programs who are asking for a pitch deck, they probably are looking to evaluate your company as an investor, would. So they're probably looking to assess your investor readiness by going through your pitch deck. Um, in some cases, the accelerator program does do an investment into your startup if you are lucky enough to be accepted. So conceptually, they actually might be looking at it as with an investor's lens. All right. So I would say the same type of goal that you would have for doing a readable version of your pitch deck would be what I would focus on for applying to an accelerator program. Notice I mentioned a readable version. We actually recommend when we do the elite pitch services, okay, and sometimes with the plus as well, depending on the complexity, we actually create more than one pitch deck. What it is that we create a reading deck and a meeting deck. Okay. The difference between the two is that a meeting deck is the deck that you should use when you have a live conversation, via Zoom, in person, whatever, where you can present the slides with a talk track. The reading deck is where you just do an email attachment, or like what you're probably doing here, you upload your deck to a portal as part of a program application. The reading deck does not have the benefit of you talking the audience through the slides, so the reading deck must stand alone without the talk track. So the design of the reading deck and the meeting deck can sometimes be slightly different, and we want to take that nuance into account. Some meeting decks are not good reading decks. And in addition, the reading deck tends to have to be a lot smaller in terms of their size because the audience tends to spend less time going through the slides on a slide by slide basis. Okay. Hopefully that provided some context. If you have other questions, feel free to uh, chime in still. Okay, where to find the blog post? And please share the link. All right, I think I just did on that the blog post for where to get the pitch scorecard, but I will paste it again so that it's more prominent at the in the chat window. All right. Uh, make the deck and when it's ready, make introduction. Okay, so let's see. All right, I don't see any other questions. Anybody want to unmute yourself real quick and ask a question? If not, we can give you back some time. Okay.
I do have a question.
hmm
So my question would be, what is the ideal amount of words per slide?
Um, it depends on the exact slide and your what the slide is trying to accomplish. But if I was forced to give an answer, I'd probably say somewhere around 30 to 50. Okay. 50's pushing it. All right. I know that's not a lot of slides. When we build the slides for our pitch deck clients, notice the on this slide that's on the screen where it says clear, concise messaging. And I mentioned earlier, probably 60% of our time is spent on writing because most of the time that we get a deck from a startup, they might have 100, in some cases 200 or more words. Sometimes we're looking at like 12-point font, and it's 200 words, and that's just way too many. Okay. Um, so most decks that we recommend, especially the meeting deck, make it lightweight. When you're meeting with someone, okay, you want them to pay more attention to you talking than you want them to actually read your slides. So if you have all sorts of distracting content, lots of words, etc., the audience cannot dual track from listening and reading the slides. And that's why we encourage the slides to be very lightweight, so it minimizes the cognitive tension of am I listening or am I reading? Okay. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, it definitely does make sense. Would you recommend putting together like a demo video of some sorts for investors, like a 30-second clip for them
Okay.
to watch? Or is that kind of a no-go?
Okay, there's lots of different opinions about that, and I'm going to jump over to this overall uh, my version of a pitch deck template. I hate calling it a pitch deck template, but it's the closest thing, the closest term. Notice there's not a slide here that says demo video. Okay, that doesn't mean it's wrong or it's bad. It depends on the nature of your startup and the nature of the problem you're solving. So one of the most important things to do for to address conciseness is that when we design a pitch deck, we focus on within 60 seconds, 90 seconds max, 60 to 90 seconds after the founder starts their pitch, we want the investor to clearly understand what the company is doing, what the problems are, and what the problem is. Hopefully, the solution comes very, very soon afterwards. Okay. If the nature of what you're doing is hard to visualize, then a solution screenshot or a solution video might be helpful. I would put the demo video alongside the solution slide, somewhere in that vicinity. Okay. And focus on that only when the nature of the solution is unclear or complex or uncommon. So if you're for example, we had a startup client that was doing something in the manufacturing space, manufacturing shop floors. Okay. Um, Unless you're pitching to a manufacturing centric investor who completely has context, the nature of the problem wasn't very clear. So in that situation, it was helpful for that particular startup to either they chose to do a demo video of their product. It was a robotic product. They chose to do a demo video of the robot doing its work and how it solves specific problems on the manufacturing shop floor. Because unless you're a machinist working a CNC machine, you do not understand the day-to-day stuff, the day-to-day problems. And the solution kind of went over the head of the typical non-manufacturing investor. That might be a situation where a demo video or screenshots or something like that could be helpful to help the investor understand the solution more. But think about carefully what your story is, how who your audience is. Don't do it all the time because if you're again talking to somebody who already knows and understands, then the demo video might not actually help you. Okay.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. And last question for me, I promise.
Mhm.
What are words that you would recommend startups stay away from and words that you highly recommend we use?
Um, it's kind of difficult it's not like I have a list of inventory, good words, bad words, There's lots of writing guides that talk about how you write your resume, use words, active voice, all those things. Those are some very generic practical things. What I would generally say is avoid sensationalism. Okay. I don't like empty claims. Okay. I have empty claims commit the sin of bis. Okay. Bis meaning because I said so. Okay. BISS. There are lots of founders who are very excited about what they're doing and they think this is going to be big. This is going to be blah, 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 blah. And, I don't like talk tracks or slides that tell me things without any support. I would prefer content that shows me what you're trying to communicate rather than unsubstantiated words that tell me something. Okay. So rather than just saying avoid the word X, Y, Z, avoid this list of words, um, I don't really have a list of words like that. I would say avoid sensationalism, focus on active voice, focus on how you can show and paint a picture of the point that you're trying to make on the slide. Okay.
Thank you so much. That helps a lot, way more than you know. Thank you.
Okay. Very good.
Hey, Sam, out of curiosity, on the ask an investment slide, when you get into valuing
Hmm.
your company, we had our last round was 5 million, but
Hmm.
due to COVID, we had to reinvent the company coming out of it.
Okay. Okay.
And since then, we won 5 million in grants with the NIH. We've had successful clinical trials. We are still in clinical trials now. How do you figure out your valuation, when you're not yet in market, you're pre-revenue, but you've raised 5 million additional dollars, the government, meaning the government likes what you're doing, they're willing to
Hmm.
fund it, right? You've got some success in clinical trials. You're not done with all of them yet. We have a
Hmm.
peer-reviewed manuscript, things like that. So it's kind of hard to put a value on the company.
You're right. So there are if you do a Google search on startup valuation, you'll probably find three or four formulas that say add 1 million for this, add 1 million for that. There's the Burkus method, there's this method, there's that method, etc. I'm not a big fan of formulaic calculations. Okay. That might give you some rough ballpark, but I'm not a big fan of that. Ultimately, the valuation is going to be a factor of two things. One, the core value that you have, and two, the state of the market. It's just like selling a home. Okay. So, the value of what determines the home price is going to be one, how good is the home? How many bedrooms does it have? Has the kitchen been renovated? Blah, 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 blah. Okay. And the location, of course. All right.
Yeah.
But there's another factor. You can have a beautiful home recently renovated in a horrible market where
Well,
interest rates are 10% or higher or whatever else.
we're in the age tech space, which, as you know, is booming, right? So
Right.
baby boomers, there's a huge need to live at home longer.
Right.
We're in that space, so it's a great market opportunity. So the
Yeah.
home is a nice community.
Right, right. So, I would generally say if you haven't been out in the market for a little while, what I would recommend that you do is spend some time looking at the state of the market with market comps, and specifically look at Carta. So,
Yeah.
go out to LinkedIn. Peter Walker is a senior director over at Carta, and he calls himself a data storyteller. Carta has a lot of data about startups, and they are mining that data beautifully and
So I
giving.
did. There's a company called Nobi in Belgium, and
Okay.
they just finished a $37 million Series B.
Uh-huh.
What we do, just it beats what they do. They do fall detection. We're actually doing prediction. So
Mm.
we're measuring neurodegeneration, and we've created a biomarker that is equivalent of like A1C for insulin resistance or blood pressure for
Wow.
cardiovascular health. So it's pretty amazing. We're funded by the National Institute of Aging, and so yeah, it's pretty wicked cool.
Fantastic. Yeah. So anyway, it's not a simple formula, and I'm not a big fan of that. You can look at the state of the market from certain research. Carta has a lot of information that's on their website. And then as you start talking to investors, float the balloon. Okay, have a couple of sidebar conversations. We had this where me and another, I was helping this one startup, and the CEO of the startup was very keen. He believed that he had a lot of value and he had some pretty high potential. Unfortunately, I told him I gave him a number of, if I was an investor, I think this is what I would be comfortable making an investment in this in your company. He thought my number was low. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. So we started having a couple conversations, and after 3 or 4 investor pitches, they all had the same number that I threw out. So he had to lower his number
Got it.
because the early evidence was saying, all right, you might want this much, but if the market says this, then
I
um,
didn't know if Band of Angels had some kind of practice they followed for valuing companies.
there's not a formula per
Okay.
se. There is a good amount of understanding where the market is because we hear so many pitches. But then there's also the active angels. They've seen so many things happen that you know, they've bid on so many houses, so to speak. They've walked through so many open houses to etc. They can kind of sense in this neighborhood, this is what would be reasonable for this
Got
house.
it. Great job today. Thank you.
Sure, Steve. Okay. Let's see, there's another question here as in terms of financials, what would you recommend pre-seed startups include? Okay. We actually had on Tuesday of this week, just 2 days prior, a summary of our startup financial model, which we include in our due diligence class. We actually have a simple financial model in our diligence class. We have an advanced financial model in our how to model startup financials class. Um, and what we included in that topic was a list of details of metrics and numbers that I like to see. To summarize real quickly, I don't have the slide right in front of me at this moment, but to summarize on the financials, um, users or customer growth, revenue, expenses, profit, and then maybe some other things that show some other metric. But those are the key four. You might, in some cases, have like employee count as it grows over time. You can go out 3 years. So that's the raw data table, and if you want to put it in a chart, that's fine. I also recommend making some mention of this data was built through a bottoms up monthly model with multiple scenarios. And you're presenting the mid-range scenario, not the aggressive growth and not the conservative growth. You're presenting the mid-range. So make mention of some of that because you can't, spell out your entire complex model. The model that I shared in the class on Tuesday this week has over 1,000 knobs to be able to turn and customize. You can't get into all that detail in just the 30 or 40 seconds that you might have covering a slide. Okay. But what you can do is talk about the fact that the numbers you're presenting, you can talk about how you followed a rigorous bottoms-up model to be able to generate those numbers, and then later, when the investor goes through diligence, they can kind of have a separate meeting focused just on the model itself. Okay. Another question: is there such a thing as too low of an ask? I think the question here is that is it too low of the amount of funds you're raising or too low of a valuation? Okay. It is possible to have too low of your funding amount requested. What I recommend is that you do the bottoms up in your financial model, and the financial model should be tied to fundable milestones by inflection points. I have another class that talks about how to build a startup funding strategy, and it's all about funding raising after you hit an inflection point, because that's when you're going to be the most fundable. The the inflection points should be made up of product, sales and marketing, intellectual property, and business development inflection points. Figure out what those elements are in your business plan, and then figure out the time and cost necessary to be able to hit those milestones. That bottoms up detail should be reflected in the financial model, and that informs the dollar amount that you should be raising to hit a certain milestone. Okay. So that's how you determine what the ask should be in terms of how much money to raise. Now, in terms of the valuation, we talked earlier about understanding the value of your company as well as the state of the market. So, if you do end up setting a valuation that's a little bit on the low side, the best thing to do is to focus on raising a small tranche. Okay. So, as you're testing the waters as to what the investor market will sustain for evaluation, if you don't know what the valuation is and you set it a little bit too low, then raise a small amount of money on that valuation. And then as you get oversubscribed, you're like, oh, my valuation might have been a little bit too low. Then with all follow-on investors after the first raise or the first tranche, raise your valuation because you have good data that says, what you have is in high demand. If you don't raise too much money on a low valuation, if you do the calculations on the amount of dilution, it has less of an impact. Okay. So again, if you're early in your process, we do recommend in our how to raise from founders, friends, and family class, we talk about how to be able to do that. I'm not going to get into that here. There's a lot of other detail. Okay. All right. Okay. Uh, what exactly is market opportunity? That's a more involved question. Okay, I'm gonna skip that maybe answer this. We'll do just maybe just two more questions. If you have only friends and family investment, but it costs 5 million to start a manufacturing plant for advanced building material, is that too much to ask in a first round? Ooh, okay. Um, so if you need 5 million to start build a manufacturing plant, is that too much to ask? And for an initial round, um, I think it is a tall ask, but it's not impossible. What you need to be able to do is show how well, a couple things. One is demonstrate the potential for the company that 5 million is going to be a drop in the bucket for the potential return. The other is to communicate what I would say timeline. Okay. Notice here on this slide, timeline is slide number 14. If you have to do something as complex as building a manufacturing plant, one thing that's going to, if you really have to do that, and I'm not really sure that you truly have to do that, but let's assume that you do have to do that, okay, as part of the raise. In order to communicate and build confidence to an investor that the 5 million will be well spent, the the timeline can help with that. You show 3 to 5 things that in your past, major milestones that you planned and milestones that you've already hit. That shows that to me as an investor, you can actually get stuff done. Okay. And then there's 3 or 4 other elements in the timeline. So the timeline should look back and look forward. Okay. Looking back gives me confidence that you know how to drive. You've been driving for, 5 years, no accidents, no tickets. So when you say, I'm going to drive across country to New York and I need to do it quickly, I have more confidence you're not going to crash or fall asleep at the wheel. Okay. So timeline should look backwards and look forwards. The successful history of execution in the past suggests that you will have greater potential to be successful in the milestones that you are still coming down the road. All right. The other thing I would say that about this 5 million, what can you do before you actually build out the full manufacturing plant? They talk about minimum viable product. I would also say minimum viable manufacturing or minimum viable proof points. Okay. So think through that. One of the companies I just invested in was a deep tech solar company, and they need 25 million plus to build out all their solar panel chemicals. Okay. They didn't just rush right into building a big fat manufacturing plant. They started small. It wasn't scalable. They did everything manually, etc., with a couple of machines to help them. But it was the lowest cost that they could do to be able to demonstrate early numbers on the yield, on the efficiency of the solar panel. Okay. So they use that to raise a larger round, which then they allocated the funds to be able to build out a small to mid-size manufacturing plant. Okay. All right. Getting near the top of the hour. I should probably let everybody go. We've been running for a while here.
I have one last question, Sam. I'm so sorry.
Mhm.
So what we're doing is with AI, for literary purposes, making developing an app for literary purposes using AI. How would I best go about showcasing when it's never been done?
I think I'd need to understand more about what you're doing and how to be able to tell the story. Okay.
Okay, could I send you my email to discuss it?
We can do a coaching call.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, we can do a coaching call. I apologize. I'd love to be able to volunteer time. I got 4 hours of sleep last night because another company is about to close a round, and I need to kind of get them over the hump and stuff.
Hey, that's a-okay. I got 4 hours of sleep. I've got a newborn, so I totally understand.
Yeah, yeah. Congratulations on the newborn.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Children are wonderful.
They are a blessing, truly.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I wish we could spend more time here. Love to see everybody succeed. Hopefully, the stuff that we're sharing helps you out. Pass the word. We love referrals and introductions. Okay, thanks. Have a good one.
If this was helpful, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. You can also check out our other videos for more startup content.